speaker. Nobody's told me, so I'll ask somebody, but after I finished. I've got dark glasses on, I won't see it. Recently, I was browsing my bookshelf and my eyes lit upon this bright red covered book. This one. I'm not going to read it to you. This is my wife's thesis on Jonathan Edwards, entitled Jonathan Edwards, Born to be a Man of Strife, in which she analysed the life and the experiences and all the conflicts and experiences that had shaped this man to be the man he was destined to be. America's greatest philosopher and theologian of experiential spirituality. It's a brilliant study. I don't recommend you read it. Not working, Kim. Next slide. Right. 12 years ago, we visited my son's family in America, during which time we went to an equestrian event where my 12-year-old granddaughter was riding in this crazy event called barrel riding. When the judge was making the awards, she said to Katie, "You were born to ride." At which Katie took off on a pony, spurred it furiously, racing through the arena, born to ride, as she and her horse just blurred together in this exuberant enthusiasm as they raced the length of the arena. And we all know of people who are born to be something, born to be a born musician, a born teacher, a born athlete. These are people we see and we admire because they seem to do what they do so excellently well, yet it seems to be so easy and natural to them. They do it well, they're enthusiastic about it. We all admire them for the greatness of what they are doing in their role. This business of what we were born to be. I think we can identify what we were born to be by looking at ourselves and saying, what is it I do well? What is it I do so easily and naturally, yet I do it well and I really enjoy it. I get a buzz out of it. It fulfills me. Then we know what we're born to be. And on the 31st of August in this church, a wise man made the statement, "You were born to do something for God." And I've pondered that thought ever since over those last couple of months, wondering, what was I born to be? What was I born to do for God? And more importantly, what am I now being born to do for God? I can reflect on 50 years of professional life and say, I was a born teacher. And I could probably substantiate that with some evidence, but I loved it. I got a buzz out of it. I think I did it pretty well. But I can't say that now because I'm not. I'm an 80-year-old has-been. So I know it, I've been told often enough. But what now? In the words of the same wise man 1 week ago. What now? And so, as a member of this church, I'm committed to the mission of this church, which we've read before every year on our annual reports. We read it, and in our constitution it's there to bring people into a personal and growing relationship with Jesus Christ by showing God's love in word and deed. Like all mission statements, that's a very general, broad-based statement of a guiding ethos for everything we do. We have to put that into some kind of more practical aspirations. And our church, this is going to get awkward, I'm not used to this, but our church has set up these aspirational goals for us for this year, captured in that acronym of THRIVE, to teach, to reach out to people, to equip for ministry, all those other things that you see there on the screen. And again, we were reminded of them last week. I felt last week that I was having a prequel to my sermon when Mike was preaching, but still. But these are the goals we have. Now, these goals don't actually mean a whole lot other than nice statements that we remind ourselves of every now and then. They actually become something only when you and I, as individuals, work out what are the specific actions I can do to make this all happen. We have to know where we're going to put our foot, where we're going to put our hand, what we're going to do with our mouth. Those are the functional things we need to work out. So I've had a problem. I've struggled with this for the last couple of years with my increasing age, declining capacities, and my retirement from my professional ministry roles. What am I doing? What am I doing? The sense of being alive, but not really living a life of worth. A lack of productivity. Not doing anything of worth to myself, to my family, to my church, to my God. And so the world closes in. It's a problem. Somebody who's used to being hectically involved in everything, and now I just can't be. So my professional life is finished, but I haven't forgotten the lessons I learned. One of the things was, when you've got a problem, find a solution. My solution has been to think through a 4-point plan. And I want to share with you this morning, by way of a personal commitment and as a bit of a testimonial statement, how God has led me to articulate a 4-point action plan so I can do something constructive for God. My 4-point plan is tied up in just 4 words: sustain, enrich, strengthen, and redeem. And those 4 words, to me, these are things that God has put on my heart that I've got to be actively doing. First point has a biblical base. All of these points have a biblical base. And what I want to do for the next little while is just to share with you the biblical base of these 4 points as they apply to me. Hopefully you'll see a reference to yourself as well, but that'll be up to you and God to work that out. But a biblical base, and then some practical applications that I plan to put into action over the next 12 months, starting now. We read in Hebrews to spur one another on to love and good deeds, not giving up meeting, but encouraging one another. And that's the basis of my action plan for this first point, to sustain the fellowship. To sustain the fellowship, to me, means I need, first of all, most of all, to ensure that I am a positive presence within the life of the church. If I can do that one thing consistently and well, I'll be doing a good thing. Be a positive presence in the church. And to do that, there are things I can work on. I can look for opportunities to encourage other people, to help them in their ministries, to look for good, not bad. It's a human characteristic that what we look for is what we tend to find. So if I come to a church service and look to find fault with it, with something in the sermon that I don't agree with in interpretation and get myself tied up in it, I miss the richness of God speaking to me. If I come and I've got a bit of a beef with somebody else in the congregation, I've lost the plot. If I have a niggle, get rid of it. To actively to look for the good in people, to look for the good in their ministry, to support them, to appreciate them, not only to appreciate them, but to express that appreciation to them and to others about them. Speak about people behind their back, yes, but do so in a way that builds them up, not knocks them down. Suppress those ill feelings that will tend to rise up occasionally in anybody's imperfect heart. I must admit, yeah, I will. Nothing to do with this church. But for about 30 or 40 years, I had a particular niggle. And it was the words in one of our hymns that have been sung for ages. We've no less days to sing God's praise since when we first began. That niggled me. You know why? In that sentence, there are at least 4 horrible grammatical mistakes. And whenever we sang it, I would silently protest by singing under my voice the words with corrected grammar. And so, Michael, why are you looking at Nola? But see, when I have a little niggle like that, I lose. Nobody else does, but I do. And in recent years, as I've sought to be more positive, I've looked through the grammar and I've seen the man behind it. I've seen the man pouring out the spirit of his heart, and I can rejoice. So I can sing those words now, non-grammar or not. It doesn't bother me, because I've come to realise that people are more important than grammar. And though I love language, I love people more. And so, but there are warnings we have to look out for. I have to look out for. You see, I am sad about the fact that in the last couple of years in our church, my church, a number of people have decided they had to leave the fellowship. And that saddens me. I don't lay blame anywhere, but it saddens me. What I do in terms of my action plan is I ask myself 2 questions. What have I done to contribute to these people's decision to leave? What have I done? I reflect upon that, and I can think to myself, I haven't really done any action that's been nasty, but maybe I said something that was a bit dismissive. Maybe my sense of humour was unintentionally hurtful, and I don't know, but what have I done? At least a couple of cases, I didn't know people very well when they left. I didn't know why. Didn't really ask why. Nobody told me why. But I was sad to see it. But the second question I have to ask myself is probably a bit more subtle and a bit more pervasive, and a bit more difficult. What did I not do that would have made it impossible for them to leave? Did I not value them enough for the work they were doing? Did I not appreciate the little bits they were doing? Did I just walk over them in the sake of efficiency to do it better, and thereby unwittingly belittle them? Did I not appreciate them enough? Did I not honour them enough? Or did I pass up the opportunity to do something to heal a little bit of a rift that I'd noticed? As I say, not my business. And let the problem go by and let them go away. So those are things I need to watch out for as I seek to be a positive presence in the church. The next one is to enrich the poor. And you'll see these verses. I'm not exegeting the verses. You've all known all these verses, I'm sure. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. When did we do this, Lord? When you did it to one of these, my children. Enrich the poor is not a nice thing to do. It's a necessary thing to do. It's a requirement of Jesus. He modelled it. He taught it. He demands it. He expects it. In our church, we have many good examples of this. There are many opportunities here. I need to find opportunities. I need to seek areas where I can be involved in doing this, in supporting the various ministries, charitable ministries of the church. I need to look after, to check in on the 2 widows who live next door to me. 2 different houses, but one's just lost her husband recently and she's grieving badly for it. He was her rock. And the other one is often exploited by a couple of freeloader sons who come back and exploit her. And so I need to make sure I'm checking on them. And in the church, there are many good examples for me to emulate, to follow examples. This church does well in this area, better than most churches I've ever seen, let alone be a part of. The hampers, the op shop. The first thing that struck me when I came to this church the first day 2.5 years ago was the Bangladesh Cow Project. It was absolutely brilliant and made a deep impression on me, because not just because they were doing something good, but because the enthusiasm with which it was received by the church. When Renee came out here and showed how our year-long project of $800 has been filled in 6 weeks or something, everybody just cheered and clapped. And yeah, there's such an enthusiasm. And these weren't teenagers hooping and hollering. These were the golden oldies, clapping and applauding. There's such an enthusiasm to do this sort of thing in this church, and I want to be a part of that. There are warnings. There are warnings for me as well. Not to think that I can't get involved because I'm too old, I'm too tired. I've done it all before, pass the baton on to somebody else. Then I look around this church and I see most of the people carrying that baton are older than I am. So I've got to try to run a bit harder to catch up with them. But there's also the problem of my upbringing is one which said, you take responsibility for yourself, and if you've got a bad time, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and don't expect anybody to give you anything. So I did that. Dysfunctional home, lost house, all that sort of stuff. Parents hated the church, hated education, hated anybody who was successful in life. And so, like my sisters, I was supposed to leave school at 13 or 14, get a job, support the family. I didn't. So I pulled myself up by my bootstraps. And so I've tended to be rather cynical and hard-nosed about people who cry poor all the time and don't do anything about it. That's an attitude I've had to deal with very severely in myself. And it's a wrong attitude, in case you're wondering. It's a very wrong attitude. It's a totally anti-Christian attitude. And I am very happy that in our church, we give food hampers away free. No demand for anything. We had a man in here one day, big truck driver, 45-ish, I suppose, and he came in one day and he was ashamed to be there. And he said, I've got a full-time job. I get $1,100 a week. I'm a truck driver. My rent just went up by $100 a week. I've got my trucks need to repair. I pay the electrical bill. I haven't got any money left to feed my 3 kids. And he stood there solidly but ashamed, and there were tears trickling down his face. I couldn't say to that guy, give me $20 and I'll give you a hamper. No, I gave him 2 hampers. And Ron Newton said, good on you. And that's the spirit that this church does. I love that. So those warnings I have to take heed of. The cynicism about other people's needs. They have a need. Simply, they have a need. It's not my job to assess that need. Just meet it. The third point is to strengthen the weak. Again, you can see Isaiah, it's a comprehensive call to social justice. Nothing less than that. Learn to do right. Seek justice. Not just hope for justice, not just wink at injustice, but defend the oppressed. Take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. That's active, not passive. That's do it. Don't talk about it endlessly, do it. And it's an area where I've struggled. Now, when I was a young kid, I would sometimes accompany my father to union picket lines when they were on strike for better working conditions. When I was a university student in the 1960s, I would frequently go on demonstrations and marches, protesting against social evils, the Vietnam War, the women's rights, standing up for women's equality, protesting against the government's incursions on human rights, etc. But then as I grew older and settled into a mature married life with a family, teaching as a profession, I became more satisfied with being a good, civil, obedient civilian, citizens. And so I became disengaged from any sort of social activity. But now as I see the world around us, including our affluent society, and see so much evil, so much oppression, it's got to do something. How do we do this? What are opportunities? I'm going to suggest that we as individuals see what we can do to engage in the political process where a lot of this has to be addressed. I'm not lobbying on any party politics or anything here. not at all. Students once said to me, when I tend to be satirical about politicians, I said, we can't figure out what party you belong to and which ones you hate. I said, no, I'm totally non-partisan. I have equal contempt for all political parties. It's a bit of an exaggeration. There's a bit of my sarcastic humour with classes, but I shouldn't do that here, should I? But I can engage with politicians. I can be involved in petitions and letter writing and so on. And incidentally, one politician did tell me once that names on a circular petition don't mean a lot. One person writing an individually framed letter is 10 times more than signature on a petition, because that takes time. They've got to be serious about it, not just, oh yeah, I'll sign that petition as it goes by. And so I've written a number of these letters, and I'm not going to stop just because they might not succeed. One to a local state member, I wrote a letter asking him to vote basically against his party's line. I got a form letter back, printed out, circular copies from the party office saying, yeah, we read your letter, we considered that, we're rejecting it, goodbye. And that was no account. But if they get 10,000 of those, they'll have to take notice. Another one I wrote to a federal cabinet minister. He was a defence minister, and I was sticking up for some students who'd been dudded by the Austudy office. And I wrote to him a reasoned statement, asking him to do something about it. A week later, a phone call from Canberra. The manager of the Austudy, national manager, contacting me, apologising, telling me he'd straighten it out, make sure of it, and he gave me his personal direct number in case I had any more problems. So they're the two extremes of responses. And I've had a couple in between there. And when I wrote to a member who's a Christian, who's standing up for Christian ethics, wasn't beating the Christian drum, but everything he stood for had Christian ethics written all over it. So I wrote a letter supporting him, just to tell him what I thought of him, which was very good, by the way. And I met him later, and he thanked me so much. He said, I need that sort of encouragement because it's a hard road to do that in Canberra. So these are the things that I can do, things I must do. There are warnings to look at the problems and say, too big, overwhelming, can't do anything about it. When I see evils in the community, do I leave them to somebody else? Somebody else's problem, not mine. Do I walk away and tut about it, but do nothing? See, I think it's not much good, my complaining about these things inside the church if I don't express those thoughts to the church, to the world. I shouldn't complain about the world if I don't speak to the world about it. Final point, to redeem the lost. We all know the story of the prodigal son. We've heard that since we were kids in Sunday school, I'm sure. But as I read this recently, I think not so much about the prodigality of the son, but the sense of loss by the father. See, when the prodigal son was doing his party tricks, he didn't feel lost. He was happy. He was independent of his father's rules and he could do whatever he liked. But for years, that father sat at home grieving the loss of this son. And when he came back, you can read it. Let's feast, let's celebrate, let's do everything we can. And I've been thinking on this story, and I think of the grief that God must have when he sees so many of his lost children turning their back on him despite his all benevolent and benign love and care and mercy. My father has a great sense of loss if he's lost his son. I know this because I have a lost son. No, he's not a prodigal. In fact, he's one of the most noble, generous, good-living, decent, honest men I've ever known. I admire him greatly. And there's no family rift. There's not a matter of no speaks. We communicate as much as we can. But there is an insuperable gulf between my son and me. It's called the Pacific Ocean. Because he lives in America, migrated there nearly 15 years ago, never been back, can't travel back here, I can't travel over there. So he's lost. The little toddler, 2-year-old, who would come down when he'd hear us at the door to pick up his older brother and sister to go to school, he'd hear the door click and he'd come running down to the door saying, "Gamma, Gamma, Gamma," jump into Carol's arms. He's now a 6-foot, 16-year-old senior. Yeah. And I haven't really not had anything to see him grow up. My older two are now, 11-year-old daughter is now a mum of a 1-year-old. We've got 3 great-grandchildren I've never met and I'll never get to hug. And that's an awful sense of loss. But most of all, I miss my son. It's a sense of separation that grieves me. And what I would give if some wonderful benefactor someday could just pick him up and bring him home to me. And then I think, what joy would God have if I could bring one of his lost children back to him? I loved our Connect 25 in this church 6 weeks ago. No, we did not get hordes of people flocking in. There's no flood coming in to see who are these great people at Living Hope. And we didn't have 100 people sitting here saying, "Tell us more." We had a trickle. But what I saw was not whether we had a trickle or a flood, but what I saw was this church actually doing something. I saw a mindset change in our church. We have always been very pleased and glad and good at welcoming anybody who walks through that door. They come in the door and we say, "Welcome, glad you're here." But on that day, I saw a mindset change from being a church that welcomes people to come in to inviting people to come in. And that's a very significant change of our church collective mind. Some of us, I dare say a fair number of us, weren't quite sure what we're supposed to do on that morning. But we decided to give it a go, to have a go. So I just turned up here. I had no creative ideas to offer to the team who was organising that. I was asked, "You got any thoughts?" I said, "No." That's a summary of what I said anyway. But I decided, as I was talking to somebody else who had the same concern, the confusion about what we were supposed to be doing. And we both agreed, but whatever it is, somebody's got an idea, we're going to get in and do what we can to support it. And that's the attitude I want to keep going, to have that mindset where we are inviting people. We had a trickle, but let's see that trickle grow to a stream, to a flood. And we can rejoice when they come back to the Lord. So, redeeming the lost, sustaining the fellowship is my Christian core responsibility. Enriching the poor is my Christian social community responsibility. Empowering, strengthening the weak is my Christian total humanitarian responsibility. And redeeming the lost is my Christian missional responsibility. So, friends, my action plan is this. I give you this action plan this morning as a testimonial rather than an exegesis. It's a testimonial of what God has led me to commit to. I share this with you as an act of commitment, an act of accountability. I would like people in this church, my family in this church, to keep me accountable for doing this action plan, putting it into operation. Ask me occasionally, "What have you done in your action plan for this last week?" And ask me, what are the outcomes of it? What have you seen happen as a result of it? Because without results, it's a bit of a pointless exercise. So I commit to you, this is my action plan to be a part of God's mission in this church. But what about you? What's your action plan? I want to encourage you all to follow the same steps as I followed in arriving at my action plan. To have a look at yourself, to understand what you were born to be. And you can do this by looking, what do I do? What do I enjoy doing most? What do I spend a lot of my time doing? What do I get a buzz out of doing? And then talk to somebody about it, a pastor, an elder, a friend, your child. Your children will often give you good feedback. Even when you don't want it, they still will. But your children are very observant. It might be music, it might be cooking, it might be speaking, it might be leading Bible studies, it might be anything. I don't know. I don't have the creativity to imagine what the whole scope could be. But find it, identify it, talk about it, and see if there's some way you could do that. I had a boss who appointed staff, not because he had a particular position to fill, but because he knew they were good people and he wanted them to come on board and then do their thing. And the net result of that was, with 5 or 6 or 7 of these key people, that college just blossomed in its strength. After about 5 years of that policy, that college that I worked with, which was ACOM, by the way, okay, I'll call it a name, had about 8 or 9 students when he started. 8 years later, it's the flagship, one of the flagship colleges of Australia. Hundreds of students. The key one in the whole of the university college of which it's a part. Because of his policy of enabling people to bring their gifts, identify them, no matter how wacky they were, they talked to him and he said, well, let's see how we can make this work. And it always did. And then look inside, look outward, look to see what are the opportunities. Talk to people, observe, I could do this there if I had the chance. Well, talk to somebody and they'll give you the chance. Don't just sit back and think, oh, no, I'm not good enough for that. I read a PhD thesis this last 2 weeks of one of my junior colleagues from that same college. And when I met her 10 years ago, she was a very lacking in confident type of person in that arena. She thought she wasn't good enough for it. I mentored her for 5 or 6 years, and she's one of my great success stories. That's why I'm boasting about it now. But she's a brilliant person. It just needed a few of us, that principal, me, 1 or 2 others, to tell her, hey, you've got capability. You're doing well. And my strength with her was I picked up on what she was doing and threw it in her face. In other words, I gave her the evidence from her own experience to show that she was capable. And she's just done a brilliant thing. Her Hebrew knowledge is far above what mine will ever be. But express your capabilities. Recognise your limitations. Anybody here without any limitations? Well, that means if everybody has limitation and we let that limitation rule us, that means nobody ever does anything. And so we have limitations. Recognise them, be honest about them. Know what you can and also know what you can't do. And don't try to meddle in those areas where somebody else is doing it because you've got a bright idea when you're complete no hope in it. Like, hey, I'm never going to tell Carolyn how to organise music. If somebody asks me to organise a Sunday school picnic, I can do that. I can organise stuff. But if somebody asked me to join a church choir, I'd say, no way. I have one musical talent, that is keeping my mouth shut while the music's on. And correcting the grammar of hymns. But then don't be daunted by your limitations. Recognise them, but don't let them rule you. I have to make sure that I don't let them rule me. My first day at Hampers, I was looking around, not knowing what people were doing, just trying to get a gauge of what I could do. And Michael must have seen me standing around and looking for a job. So he's down here and he called out, Les, how are you at cutting pumpkins? My answer was, got no idea, but I'll give anything a go until I prove my incompetence. And so I cut and I chopped and I dropped and, the pumpkins. And over the next couple of weeks with Jan's gentle nudging and advising on the way she did things a little bit differently and so on. And so I learned over the next 3 or 4 weeks, I became a master pumpkin cutter. And not only that, I had a bonus. I could also do watermelons. So they were new skills to me, I can tell you. But I didn't let my ignorance, my lack of experience, my incapacities daunt me. I just said, I'll give it a go. Now, I've done that with a number of things and found that, hey, I really can't do this. That's okay. Nothing wrong with having a go and failing. The biggest failure is not having a go. So then the final point is commit to working out those opportunities. Activate. Don't just meditate, but activate. And so, friends, I'm asking you to take this process with you of those 4 steps. Understand what you're called to be. Look for opportunities to express that. Know your limits, but don't be daunted, and then activate and do it. I could add a 5th one here, but I want to keep it 4 points like my plan, so persevere. If you don't get it all done this week, do it again next week. So may I just encourage you, I would love to hear somebody come to me, to an elder, to a pastor, to a friend and say, I've got my action plan. I'd love to see us with our own action plans. Will you join me in committing ourselves to this action and carrying out our action plan for Christ?
Hey, Les, can you handle a challenge?